I was wrong, but I was also right. There you go, I said it. Anyways, guys, welcome to the shop. Today's episode, we're going to be doing some electrical work, and it's going to be done on Suzy, because if you guys remember last episode, Suzy was down, out for the count. I couldn't drive her anywhere. And if you don't know, Suzy is my 1978 Glendale motorhome. We purchased it last year. Been having a lot of fun with it. But in this episode, we are going to fix her up so that she can be drivable again. And that is with the help of our sponsor, Suzy Starter and Alternator. They're located on Falconbridge Rd in the Falcon 5 plaza. If you guys are in the Suzy area, go check these guys out. Really good. I talked to Brian, he sent me through the whole shop and he tested the alternator for me, and that's when I found out I was wrong. The alternator in fact was good. So we're going to jump right into the video. Grab yourself something to drink. It might be a little bit of a long one, but I'm going to explain the whole situation as what happened, and we're going to get her back up and running. Alright guys, getting right back into work here. One thing that Brian mentioned while I was having a nice conversation with him was to check the isolator. Now the isolator is actually located over on this side, and by isolator I mean battery isolator, because an RV like this will have multiple batteries. I have two batteries mounted at the back and one mounted on the opposite side over there, and he mentioned that the isolator can cause all sorts of issues if it's not doing its job. Well, check this out, guys. You see that burn mark on both of those terminals? And if I take this one off, I want to talk about this one in a second. This one is, yeah, this isolator, she done. She did her job. So, if I go ahead and I put this wire back on, just to show you guys what I'm talking about, and I go over to where the alternator, I don't have it in place, of course, but if I go over to the alternator and you see that wire right there, if I connect my wire or my multimeter to it, sorry guys, what happened there? I am holding the zoom button. That is what's happening there. Sorry about that. So if I turn my multimeter on now and I do a resistance check, we're going to hear a tone telling us that that wire goes directly there, which is great. So that's something we have to fix. But then looking even further, this wire, which is my ignition wire, isn't getting 12 volts. That's another thing Brian mentioned. I need to get 12 volts ignition on this side, and this one here I can loop right back into the alternator if I like. More importantly, I mean, look at the wire job on that. That's just, it's atrocious. I mean, it's bad. I just peeled off like a little bit of tape, and this is what I found. And this black wire, there's a lot of wires, guys, but don't get too intimidated when you do this stuff. Just one thing at a time. Goes into my electric choke. Follow me over to this side, which is right here. And if this wire doesn't get 12 volts, my choke plate will not open, which is this one right here. And if that doesn't open, it's going to run terribly, because these secondaries only ever open when you really mash on the throttle. So how this thing ran the way it did, I'm pretty amazed. So we got definitely a bunch of wiring issues to fix right there. This wiring's pretty bad too, as well as this wiring going to the thermostat. But don't worry, we're going to fix all of that. Okay guys, so I decided to tackle the ignition wire, and as to why I'm not getting full voltage, still not 100% sure, but this is the ignition wire, and this is the front of the fuse panel, this whole thing. So if you go underneath the dash, this is basically the plug. You can see the bolt right here. So if I go to the back of the fuse panel and I probe it, I know where the wire is. I still haven't determined exactly 100% why I'm not getting 12 volts. My guess is corrosion. So there's two things I could probably do here. One of those being that I can probably take the bolt out and try and clean up some of these connections. But I won't lie to you, I don't want to touch any of this stuff. It's really old. It's a 78, like 44 years old at this point, and everything else in this fuse panel is working as it should. So I really don't want to touch anything right now. So I'm going to run another ignition wire right from the key switch going to our ignition wire right back there, and that's also going to help out with the choke, making sure that that choke opens when it should. So let's tackle that first. Alright, so I think I may have just found a feasible 12 volt source that is switched, and that right there is something that Brian also mentioned, is maybe using a sensor. Brian's been super helpful for this particular part of the project. So right there is our coolant sensor. So if we check the multimeter right now with the key off, we don't have any power. If I turn the key on, there we have it. We've got ourselves some battery power. So that's cool. And even more conveniently, yeah, check out this engine. I think I need to clean it out, give it a nice wash, maybe a bath, figure out where some of this oil leakage is from. But anyways, going back to where that wire goes, it conveniently runs right across the top here and right into this harness, which right above it, I just cut off the pigtail, but this is our sense wire, and then this black wire right here is the wire going back into the choke, and this would have been the old ignition wire, which I think I'm just going to cut right here, almost flush with the harness, and I'm going to put a, I don't know, a heat shrink I think on there, because there's still a little bit of voltage going through it, but I'm going to eliminate it that way there. It won't cause a harm or cause any kind of sparkies later underneath this doghouse. So let's get that done. And cutting off our old ignition source. And we're going to have to put a piece of tape for now, because of course I cannot find the proper size shrink tube, but luckily this is accessible from underneath the hood. Alright, and next up we're going to start wiring in the nice new plug that was provided to us by Falconbridge starter and alternator. So grabbing our little heat shrink connectors. These are nice because they come with the heat shrink already on them. Love these things. Crimp that on nice and tight. Give it a good pull test. We're going to connect our sense wire. So I'm going to connect my sense wire back into the harness, and we're going to give it a shot that way. If for whatever reason it's giving us a hard time, I'm going to go ahead and loop it back onto the alternator terminal, just like it was suggested to me by Brian. Give that a bit of a shrink. Always be super cautious around any type of engine when you're doing open flame. And now we're going to take our power, and we're going to have to take how are we going to do this? So we're going to take this wire, we're going to cut it up into half, and we're going to connect our choke wire into it, as well as our ignition wire here for the alternator. And I think just to give ourselves a little bit more room to play, I'm going to add a little bit of length on this white wire with some other white wire. Shrink that down as well. Making sure we have enough plug length going to the back of the alternator, or to the top I should say. And of course guys, I've already added some dielectric grease to the plug, because I believe every plug should have some of that to help corrosion not build up, and get some better connectivity and everything. So I'm thinking if I run the cable underneath there, okay, I should have, let's give ourselves just a little bit more. Cut it right here. So these two are going to go together, as well as our new ignition source. Like that. Oh, I'm getting cramped here. Oh. And this is where these pliers really do not shine. See, right now, I gotta loop them up around this whole wire harness that I've just created. And make sure that when I crimp them, nothing is gonna get caught in the jaws at the opposite end. I know I've asked you guys before, but I really gotta ask you again. Is there a better set out there that I'm not aware of? Give it the tug test. Okay. It looks tight. So, let's key on the switch, and let's wait a little bit, because theoretically, the way this is now wired, my choke should open. Alright, so that didn't work. Kind of had a feeling it might not, because it's a it's a water temperature sense signal. I just totally might have blew up my gauge here, but I completely pegged the needle, and I don't have 12 volts going anywhere now. So I'm going to cut that apart, and I'm going to revert back to the way that wire was supposed to be originally, and just go with my original thought and run a wire from the key switch. Well, I guess it was worth a shot. Alright, so let's try this again. We did it all. I've got it all wired up right to the key switch, and if we check up on it now and I put some power, I got the key on right now, and if I can find my red wire from my multimeter, here it is, and we go probe at the choke, we get, because the battery charger's on right now, we've got, oh wow, it's charging really hard, 15 volts, probably because my battery is low. And then we go right back to the plug here on the white side. We get the same, we get the same thing. So that's working good. Oh, and check it out. My choke's opening. Woo! That's awesome. That means it's working. So what I did, guys, I got the wire right from the key switch, like I mentioned. I followed the harness up, and conveniently enough, it came right behind the fuse panel, and right into this wire loom, come out right there. Actually where it was, right next to the one that I just canceled. So that's really cool. So now the only thing I need to do now is actually install the alternator back in its place, wire it back up, and see if it runs, see if it actually charges on its own now. Alright guys, so it's the next day, and parts have finally arrived. While I was at Sub Restarter and Alternator, I also ordered a new battery isolator. Finally came in. I mean, check this one out compared to the old one. This one will handle 90 amps. Not quite sure what this one would handle. Clearly it wasn't enough, so let's replace it. Alright, so let's see if these studs are going to stay in the unit or if they're going to come apart. Ooh. God, this thing is going to give me a hard time, I can tell already. Got my battery disconnected, of course, because the last thing you would want is to have this stuff live while you're trying to take it apart in the condition it's in. That's not working. So by the way, in case you didn't know what an isolator does, I think I talked about it earlier, but your battery isolator, the center wire here is your alternator, so alternator charge goes straight in. They would like for you to keep it as close as possible to the alternator, and also they mentioned that you should keep it away from any form of heat, so not mounted too close to the engine, but also in the stream of air, which I think this is a pretty good location. I'm going to try and put the new one right where it is, but I'm going to get this one up first. Yeah, this is cool. How am I going to do this? You know what? I'm going to have to cut all these off, and I'll put some new ring terminals, and then we'll go from there, because this is just not happening. Alright, so let's do one of these at a time so we don't mix them up because they're the same color. So we know this one here is the main battery. And we're going to tuck that one up like this. I know that because it's wired through this harness right up there. This orange one here is our radio, because I had an idea, which was to run the radio on the back batteries that were going to be powered with the solar when we're parked, rather than our start battery. This way here, in case we run the radio for too long, doesn't matter, we're still going to be able to head home. So this is our alternator. I'm going to put this one, how about we put a terminal on that one right now, so that we know. And yeah, we're actually in the bush here on the side. We got some bugs today. Camera person getting attacked.
No kidding.
I'm going to try and do this as quick as I can. So this is our auxiliary battery going to the back. And there's actually a second cable, which is the black one. Not 100% sure why that is, but I believe it's because when we're plugged into shore power, it charges through this as well. And again, like I said, that's our radio. There we go. So now we just need to put some terminals on this and then unmount that. There you go. One decrepit isolator.
Yeah.
And one nice new isolator. Let's put this one in place. I think we're going to mount it like this because it's going to fit just nicely, and all the labels are visible. So, alright, so let's mount it to the firewall first. And here's a little trick, guys. I was having a hard time doing this with two hands. I got to hold the isolator where I want, and this is a hex nut, and I don't have a magnetic socket, so just put a piece of plastic on it just to hold it in place. There's one. Actually, I hold it so well that I pull it off like this. Let's reuse that plastic. Worked good the first time. Wow, the bugs are bad here. They're hungry. Let's get this job done. One more on this side. What is going on? There we go. Nice and solid. So the top one is our main battery. And then, so that is this one over here. Just like that. Then the bottom one is our auxiliary battery, which are these two. This one, and then this one. And don't forget the radio, which I fused separately, just in case. And last but not least, we've got our alternator. Give these studs just a little bit of a snug. Don't have to go over tight. Don't want to damage anything. But tight enough that they're not going to come loose. But that's why they come with locking washers. Just like that. Now all that's left to do is to fire it up and see if we get some charging. Alright, so let's give it a couple of pumps here. Just like that right away. Check it out. Our voltmeter gauge is working just nice. It's actually indicating about 14 volts. Let's go back outside and see what we have for the starting battery, and then we're going to check back here to see if we're getting charging here as well. Alright, so let's see what we have for voltage here. So positive and negative. And we've got ourselves 14.5 volts. Perfect. Really like that. Let's go check the back. Alright, so there's one easy way I can do it. I can also check it with my multimeter at these two terminals. I got two batteries which are in parallel, meaning that they're still producing 12 volts, and there you have it, same amount of voltage there. And another way is I can just turn on my inverter right here and I'll see it on the display. So that's really cool, really happy. She's back up and running, and we only have a few more repairs, and the last one being the water on the outside for the city. Alright, and finally we've got our city water connection to do outside. I've been plugging this up with just an old rag because that's what I got. So I think before we go too far, let's install it onto the hose, pressurize the system, and see if it leaks. I don't know if this step is necessary, but it is plumbing, so I am going to use a little bit of this. Making sure I installed it the correct way, because if you guys have ever played around with this stuff and you put it on the wrong way, every time you thread it, the tape comes off. Be aware of that. Alright. Let's pop this in here. Let's get this the way we want. I think that's the way we want it, because that's where it says city inlet. Snug it up a little bit. Not too tight. Alright, let's go pressurize the system. So did we get any leaks? We didn't get any leaks. And look, it's not spewing out the end of it. My old one was like a jet. It was awesome. Awesome, but not, because then we couldn't really use the water for very long because we'd go through the water tank really quickly. Oh, that's cool. Okay. So, we're going to, there you go, Joe. Let's take these screws out. I should be careful, this is still pressurized. And let's seal this up so that we don't have any water coming in. Managed to dry it out back there because it was pretty wet. I'm going to go ahead and put a nice heavy bead. Oh no. Oh no. It's, oh yeah. All dried up. Never fails. Alright, there we go. Ah, yeah. Nice and thick. I don't want any water going in there. I'll just smooth it out after. Just something like that. Back home you go, little buddy. Alright. Start with this one. Those screws are a little bit big, but the older screws weren't holding anything because the holes are probably worn out. This is a better option. Okay, finally, I'm going to put a nice even bead around the whole thing. There you go. Still pressure on it. Still no leaks. I like it. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Always appreciate it. And as always, I hope to see you guys next time. Take care.